Okay, today we're going to discuss very relevant questions in Hilchot Shabat, and the precedent. We're going to see that the Sephardic poskim already discussed this at length, which is deliveries on Shabbat. Usually, we know that the halacha is the following. We'll start with the following. That on Shabbat, you're not allowed to ask a goy to do melacha for you. That we're all aware of. It's called Isur Amira Linochri. Misconception that people have is that they think that if you misconception is that if you ask a goy on Shabbat, that's where it's a problem. But if you're going to ask him before Shabbat, well, you didn't ask him to do anything on Shabbat. That's obviously a misconception. The Isur of the Amira Le'akum is even if you asked him before Shabbat and he's doing a melacha for you, that's called Ada'ata de Yisrael, that he's doing a melacha for a Jew. And that's Asur. Why? There's different opinions. Could be that he's considered a Shaliach. He's considered your messenger, even though En Shlichut Anochri Lechumra, Shulchan Aruch Harav of the Baratanya, Siman Resh Mem Gimel, says that Lechumra. We would say Shlichut Lenochri Lechumra. Either way, when a non-Jew is doing melacha for you on Shabbat, that is the primary and classic case of Amira Legoy on Shabbat. So far, so good? That's clear. However, there are cases in Halacha where a goy is allowed to do work for you on Shabbat. And namely, if he is not doing work per hour. Per hour is always the most stringent way that a goy is doing melacha for you. When he's doing work per hour. But if he's not doing work per hour, rather he's doing it per job, kablanut, so then the poskim compare kablanut to a concept called ada'ata dinafshe. It's on his accord. It's the work that he's doing is for himself. For example, if a non-Jew is going to go inside a room and open up a light because he wants to see in the room himself, then you're allowed to benefit from that light because he's doing it for himself. So too, if somebody is katzatz, and katzatz means he made a certain salary, that this is that this is per job, not per, the salary is per job, it's not per hour, then he's really working a da'ata dinafshi. Now there seems to be a discussion in the poskim the following. What happens if the goy doesn't have time before Shabbat to do melacha, and he only has time on Shabbat, but it's per job, it's not per hour? Would that be okay? Would that not be okay? That we're going to see is a big question of the Acharonim. And how is it applicable? Nowadays, the shipping industry is becoming more and more complicated. And Mr. Jeff Bezos is making more policies that infringe on our Shabbat. And let me give you an example. It used to be that Amazon would have 2-day shipping. What did 2-day shipping mean? If you ordered on Wednesday or Thursday, they say guaranteed date on Saturday. But they could bring it beforehand. Technically, they could bring that they decide to bring it on Shabbat is their own will. So when you would order on Amazon on Shabbat, it wasn't that big of a problem. Could be it was mutar. If you order, on Wednesday, that it comes on Shabbat, because it could have came beforehand. And that the goy is doing it on his own will. Mr. Bezos decided to change that. And he said from now on, there is something called 1-day shipping. Anytime from Thursday afternoon till Friday afternoon, if you're going to order an item, it's going to come on Shabbat. It says guaranteed date on Shabbat. And it's specifically coming on Shabbat. Is there a heter for such a thing? Is there a heter for ordering on Shabbat? Sometimes it's necessary. And not only that, they don't give you an option until after. Sometimes they'll give you an option Monday. A lot of times they'll give you an option next Thursday. That means either you order it and get it next day, or you have to wait another week. Or you have to pay and get it on a certain date. That's what comes out nowadays. So it used to be much less problematic. We're going to see that he makes other policies that are also more problematic. We're going to see that in a moment. But regarding our halacha of shipping on Shabbat, 1 day policies, what would be the halacha then? So here we have a precedent in halacha that the Sephardic poskim had similar scenarios. In their different countries, when they would bring their pot of food, their chamin, and a lot of cases it wasn't cooked yet, and they would bring it before Shabbat in order so that in a communal oven, so that the guy would put it in the communal oven on Shabbat. Problem is that sometimes a person would come last minute, and he would ask the guy, "Here, put my food in the oven," and you know he's doing it on Shabbat. You didn't ask him really. You just gave him the chamin, and it's per job. He gets paid per pot, and then he would put it in on his own. Is that allowed or is that not allowed? So here we're going to get into an issue called the following: Kovea melachto b'Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Resh Mem Daled Seif Vav discusses what happens if somebody hires a non-Jew to collect taxes for him. That's how it used to work. You used to buy the right to collect taxes, and you'd get a certain percentage, and you hired a non-Jew, specifically for Shabbat to go. Shulchan Aruch, that's allowed unless it's in a case of great need. Why is that allowed? Says the Shulchan Aruch, because it's a contractor. I'm sorry, why is it not allowed? He says he's a contractor. But even if he's a contractor, but you're telling him to do it on Shabbat, that's a problem. Shulchan Aruch doesn't speak out this point explicitly, but in Siman Shin Zayin in the Bet Yosef, he says that the reason why Kovea Melachto b'Shabbat is forbidden, it's Siman Shin Zayin, Seif Gimel, the Shulchan Aruch at the end says, why is it forbidden to be Kovea Melachto on Shabbat, to ask a guy to Melacha for your Shabbat? Because you're telling him to do it on Shabbat. So even though if you contract a guy to do Melacha on Shabbat is allowed, but not when you tell him explicitly to do it on Shabbat. That trumps the Kovea Melachto b'Shabbat, because you're telling him. But says the Bet Yosef, if you don't tell him anything, it would be allowed. So in Siman Resh Mem Daled, he says it's allowed because it was a case of great need. It was a case of hefsed. In the Bet Yosef, though, he says you wouldn't be allowed to tell him behedya, do it on Shabbat, specifically to do it on Shabbat, because that comes out very interesting. If you are telling him to do it, it's not explicit in Siman Resh Mem Daled. You'd have to look in the Bet Yosef properly, in Siman Shin Zayin, and in Siman Resh Mem Daled in the Bet Yosef there to understand properly what has just been said. But that's the rule that comes out. The Bet Yehuda says that in a case where you are specifically telling him, a non-Jew, to do something on Shabbat, even when you contracted him, it's forbidden. But if it's contracted and you didn't tell him to do it behedya on Shabbat, it's allowed. And it would seem to be it's allowed even if you didn't have time to do it before Shabbat. Therefore, says Shelot Utshuvot Bet Yehuda Rav Yehuda Ayash, the famous Gaon from Algeria, Siman Chavchet, and also in Siman Mem Daled, that if you tell a Jew, in this scenario, a Jew tells a non-Jew right before Shabbat, he doesn't tell him anything, I'm sorry, not the right term. He brings his pot right before Shabbat, and the guy decides to put it in the oven. It was katzatz. It was a set amount of money. It wasn't that he's hiring him per hour, and he's doing it on his own. Says the Bet Yehuda, based on what the Bet Yosef writes in Siman Shin Zayin, it would be allowed. And even though he's Kovea Melachto, but he didn't tell him explicitly, and it would be allowed. In Shelot Utshuvot Vayomer Yitzchak ben Walid, Siman Chavhei, he has the exact same case that he's talking about. There was seemed to be in the Sephardic countries. This was very common. The Sefer, the Pri Chadash also discusses this regarding other questions of Bishul Akum and Chotam Beto Chotam. Not getting into those questions, but regarding the halachot of Amira Lagoy, Vayomer Yitzchak says if he's going to bring it to him and he has time to put it in, the goy has time to put it in before Shabbat, it's allowed. But if he doesn't have time to put it in before Shabbat, that's called Amira. That's called that it's forbidden, because it's like he's telling him to put it in the oven. It's like he's telling him to put it in the oven. He didn't agree with the Bet Yehuda, and I'm sure he knew the Bet Yehuda. He didn't agree with it. Why? Because he said it's as if he's putting it right before Shabbat. It's as if you're telling him, and even though katzatz it's allowed, but not when it's as if you're telling him. Similarly, there is a sefer called Divrei Shalom from Rabbi Shalom Misas, which is the grandfather of Rabbi, the famous Rabbi Shalom Misas that we know is the chief rabbi in Yerushalayim, and in there the Siman Aleph, the Divrei Shalom, the sefer Divrei Shalom of Rabbi Shalom Misas, he has the same case, and he says even though the Bet Yehuda permits it, and who is greater than the Bet Yehuda, and even though this is a Inyan Dirabanan of Amir al Goy, but nevertheless, the Magen Avram seems to say that it's as if he's telling him to do it, and he found that the famous Ma'ayan Ganim of Rav Eliezer di Abila in Siman Resh Mem Gimel, I think he writes, where the Ma'ayan Ganim writes explicitly that it's asur. So even though according to the Bet Yosef it comes out that it's allowed, and so too is posek the Bet Yehuda, says the Divrei Shalom, we cannot be lenient, and we have to say that if you bring your chamin right before Shabbat, it's forbidden. And that's what he writes is the halacha. Nevertheless, there are those who vehemently argued. The Shirot Utshuvot Yismach Levav of Rabbi Yismach Ovadia writes in Siman, I think it's Orach Chaim Siman Tet, he writes that in this scenario that people would bring their pots that they're going right before Shabbat, he brings the Bet Yehuda, and he says, the Maran Shulchan Aruch is mashma, that only if you told the guy explicitly to do it before Shabbat, it's forbidden. But if you didn't tell him, just put the pot there, and he's contracted, there's no prohibition whatsoever. And therefore he comes out that it's allowed. He says, even though there is what to be machmir, like the Magen Avram, but nevertheless, since the Bet Yosef says that it's allowed, Nahagu Am, the minhag of the people that were lenient. If you want to be machmir on your own, he says, but that's why Chachamim didn't protest those who were making. Also, the Shufrei de Yosef of Rabbi Yosef Berdugo in Siman Chav Gimel discusses this exact same case, and he also comes out with that it's totally allowed because the Bet Yehuda says it's allowed. So even though you have the great Chachamim Beknes Rabbi Shalom Misas said it's asur, Yosef Berdugo says he's convinced that according to the Bet Yehuda it would be allowed. Interesting, Rabbi Shalom Misas, the recent one, Siman Lamed Vav, has a whole teshuvah in Tivuot Shamesh Orach Chaim Siman Lamed Vav, a whole teshuvah about this. And he says that somebody asked him, it should be allowed. People are doing it. Rabbi Shalom says, well, my grandfather says it's asur, and he has a whole long arichut that says it's asur. So it's a big machloket. But as I mentioned, if you look in the Bet Yosef and you go with the Bet Yehuda, Sefer Shufrei de Yosef, Yismach Levav, all give a room to be lenient. All give room to be lenient. Rav Ovadia Yosef in Chazon Ovadia, Hilchot Shabbat Chelek Gimel. The exact page I have written over here is in well, I don't have the exact page over here, but in page Taf Tzadi Gimel, Taf Tzadi Bet, I'm sorry, brings this opinion. He says, what would happen if somebody would bring his car to the mechanic last minute, and he knows that the guy is going to do it on Shabbat because the guy is telling him it's going to be ready on Sunday morning. He's going to miss church in order to bring him back the car. Says Rav Ovadia Yosef, based on these poskim that we said, the Bet Yehuda, the Shufrei de Yosef, the Yismach Levav, it would be allowed. There's also there's other poskim also that he brings that if you were katzatz, if you made a certain contracting deal, and the goy is going to do it as a contracting base, and you didn't tell him explicitly, you just gave him the car keys, it's allowed. So he says, even though you should be machmir lechetchila b'shat hatzorich, it's allowed. The Ben Ish Chai has a contradiction because he has a sefer called Rav Birachot, and there in his sefer Rav Birachot, that page Kuf Nun Daled, he says it's allowed like the Bet Yehuda, and in the Ben Ish Chai, Shana Bet Vayishlach Halacha Yudaled, he writes that only if you can't do it any other way, but really he's machmir. He says that if there's no other way to go do it besides Shabbat, it's like you're telling him. Okay, so far, let's condense everything. You're not allowed to tell a goy to do melacha for you on Shabbat. If he's contracted, it would depend. If you told him specifically, even if he's contracted, it would be forbidden. Now, what would happen? It's a scenario that you didn't tell him, but it's as if you told him. There seems to be a big machloket poskim. The Bet Yehuda says that it's allowed. Other poskim say it's forbidden. Here on Amazon, you get on the computer and you order Shabbat for Saturday delivery. You're clicking on the button. Is that considered like you're telling him or not like you're telling him? The way I understand it, it makes a lot of sense to say it's as if you're telling him to do it on Shabbat. When you click that button and you say Saturday, it's like you're telling a guy to bring it to you on Shabbat, and that would be forbidden. That would be called Kovea Milachto. The Shabbat, and that's forbidden. Even though they're contracted, they're not being paid per hour, it would be forbidden. And especially according to the Vayomer Yitzchak and others that say that Lechatechilai should be machmir, over here as that way as well. That's why Mr. Bezos made us problems. But not only that, he made us bigger problems, because it used to be that there was another heter that you could throw into the pot over here when you order a package to be given to you on Shabbat, which is the heter of Amira le'Amira, which is a double Amira. You tell one guy to tell another guy to do something. It's a big machloket. The Havot Yair has a big discussion with the Avodat Hagir Shoni, the Gedolei Ador in those days, that they went back and forth whether that was allowed or not. And le'alacha, we added as a sinif, as not on its own a heter, but we added it as a sinif. So over here, Amazon used to tell UPS to deliver it. It would be okay. Nowadays, Amazon is becoming so big, they're gobbling up everyone. They have their own delivery service. So you're asking Amazon to do it, it's Amazon who's delivering it. So what are you going to tell me? That Amazon's asking this worker and that worker and that worker. It's very difficult to say that you say Amira le'Amira in that case. Rav Shlomo Miller quoted down in the Sefer Commerce and Shabat leHalacha says that there's no heter ever Amir le'Amira in these cases, because it's like you're asking the Amazon to do it for you. You don't care how they're going to ask other goyim. Amir le'Amira means one goy independently asking another goy, so it's far removed from you. But here it's one company doing it. You can't start splitting hairs. If it was UPS, even that's not so simple according to Rabbi Miller, but other people say it is. But when it's one company, it makes things all the more so difficult. So al kol panim, the halacha would be for Shabbat delivery. It would seem to be that that's a problem, that you shouldn't order same day unless you have an option to do it afterwards. Some people tell me that Amazon Fulfillment is a subcontractor. It's a separate company. I don't know how that works, and I don't know. I think they're still under Amazon. But if it's not that way, if it's separate subcontracting, maybe you could still throw in the pot Amira le'Amira. But al kol panim, if you're telling a guy to do melacha for Shabbat, even Rav Avad Yosef and the Shufrid Yosef and the Bet Yehuda would say it's asur. Over here, and over here, it seems to be when you're clicking the buttons forbidden. So to give your car in right before Shabbat, you can tell him anything. He could have done it on Sunday, on Monday. Even though you didn't have give him time to do it, and it's as if you told him, as long as you didn't tell him behedya, there's no prohibition ofelagoy because it's contracting, it's work. It's like he's doing it on his own terms. If it would be per salary, it would be asur. But over here, since his contract is doing it on his own terms. But in a case where you know for sure that he's doing it on in a case where you're telling him to do it on Shabbat and pressing a button like telling him, it's like Sfirat HaOmer, that you don't say anything but you're writing it down the date. It's like you're saying something. That in that case it would be forbidden. So once again, Amazon is making problems for us regarding shipment. I don't know how it works in other places, but at least over here in Los Angeles, they're giving you a 1 day shipping, and 1 day shipping is going to cause us many problems, and therefore you should avoid it, and you should wait till Sunday. Chazaku Baruch.